What's up, guys? It's your boy Mizzy. I'm here today to go over LSU upcoming schedule, man. It's a lot of pressure going into this year for the Tigers. It's a lot of changes. Like I said, Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss, run that whole staff over. It's so much drama. It's like drama just follows Lane Kiffin wherever he go. One thing about Lane, he's never boring. He's always entertaining. They don't have a how the NFL had hard knocks. College football, if they had a hard knocks, it would be in LSU this year. Cause like I say, they just the most entertaining. But I think the number one job for Lane Kiffin this year is to change the culture. With Brian Kelly out the door, one thing that as far as change the culture and fix this offense, because like I said, ever since 2019 when you created magic with Joe Burrow and all that talent, LSU, like I say, their seasons have just especially for LSU standard. We know what the standard is at LSU. They've been far under that. Even last year, going into the season, people was picking this team. A lot of people was picking this team to win the championship. With Gus Nussmeier, you seen how he didn't, the offense. Somebody the offense could never get on the same page. I don't know if it was Gus Nussmeier, the play calling, whatever it was. It wasn't like I say, it wasn't working on the field. But like I say, I think Lane Kiffin will fix the offense. One thing I did like Lane. He said in one of his interviews, he said this team has to build. So he's even Lane is saying, look, let's taper expectations and realize this is a new team. First of all, you gotta think about it. It's like over 50 new players on this team that came from the portal. That's a lot of new faces to get integrated with the team. And then, like I say, then last year, your O line couldn't block. You got a whole new O line practice. I think they just brought back one guy, but you do got talent. They got a guy in the portal. I think his draft stock is projected like top 10. I can't remember the guy name, but like I say, so you did get new O line, but anybody who knows O line stuff, it has to gel. You never know if just because you bring in a lot of talent on paper, that doesn't mean that it'll mesh well and you'll just hit the ground running. But like I said, this team they paid over $40 million in NIL money. So I'm sure a lot of them boosters, they don't want to hear nothing about taper expectations. They want to hear, okay, one thing I think they definitely want to make the playoffs. That's what them boosters and LSU fans want. They want to be like, look, we definitely need to be in the playoffs. If we lost a first round exit, I think in people's minds they could be like, you know what, we're going in the right direction. We're going in the right direction. And then, like I say, last year you was 126 in rushing. I don't think you'll be that bad again. Like I said, I think Lane will, help that somewhat. Cause like I say, with the passing game, we know he likes to air the ball out. So I think that will open up rushing lanes for the running backs. Then, like I said, you got a lot more talent with Lane coming in with all the guys from the portal. And then another thing, Sam Levitt. A question: how would he be in the SEC? Coming from Arizona, that's like I say, the competition you're playing is gonna be a big jump. Now you also is playing with more talent on your team. And I watched some of Sam Levitt. The guy can play. So I would never say the guy can't play. I think he will be fine, but I think he will have certain games, his growing pains, when he plays some of the tougher competition in the SEC. But like I say, let's get into the schedule, guys. Like I said, first of all, like I said, LSU first on the schedule. They got Clemson. I say, man, another team that's under a lot of pressure, Dabo. I just don't know. I don't know how much longer Dabo's gonna be in Clemson. I know he has no championships, so that buys you time. It's funny. I didn't even realize he had been at Clemson that long. But then, like I say, when you think back, you're like, okay, it makes sense. So, like I say, I just feel like that game. I think LSU talent wise, it's just they gonna win this game by like 17, 21 points. Just because I just don't think at Clemson, I think Dabo, he's starting to get into the portal a little bit, but I think he's still stuck in his ways, and I think this game will show that like you still stuck back into the old era of college football. So I got LSU beating Clemson. Next game, Louisiana Tech. Obviously, that's a win. Like I said, everybody knows the game that everybody wants to see. At Ole Miss, third game of the season. And, you know, it's interesting putting a game this big earlier in the year because, say, if it was the 10th or ninth game in the season, both of these teams could be a lot different. You know, Ole Miss. So, like I say, this game I have LSU losing. Now, of course, LSU could win because, like I say, they have plenty of talent. The one thing I do think, because it's the third game of the year and you're playing an Ole Miss, especially at Ole Miss, that gives the team even a little more But Trinidad Shambless, they already have a lot of their offense integrated. So, like I say, you got your quarterback, so he already is familiar with the system. Yes, Lane is gone, but Trinidad is already comfortable with the team. And like I say, LSU with all these new faces, I think this game will show they may have some miscues. I think this game will show that okay, this team still has to gel. Now, I do think later in the season, the team that LSU may be better than Ole Miss. You know, we'll see. But I think at that juncture, Ole Miss will be better that day. Trinidad will pull out some magic. And LSU, they may score a lot of points, but I just think Trinidad will figure out a way to win that game. Then all of a sudden, you got Texas A&M. So like I say, man, you play Ole Miss. That's the SEC guys. You play Ole Miss, then you play Texas A&M. So then Texas A&M, I think that game, I got LSU winning that game strictly because man, Texas A&M lost a lot of players on that defensive line and defense to the NFL. I do think that team will still be great. Like we see the money that Texas A&M spending, so the team will be good. And now Marcel Reed, I like him. But one thing about Marcel Reed, he and we'll see if he's learning anything from last year. He's a high risk, high reward player. So he throws a lot of balls out there that could be picked or it could be a great play. I just think LSU this game will bounce back. You don't want to lose two games early in the season, like I say, especially with an SEC schedule that's just tough, and you got to get your wins early. So, like I say, I got LSU winning, beating Texas A&M. Then, like I say, next game at Nice, you know, easy game. Everybody know they're gonna win that. Then at Kentucky, you know, it's funny because Kentucky, where it's just like, what is Kentucky? Kentucky is always just teams that's just in like the either the middle or lower part of the SEC. And then like, you know, the game versus Georgia a couple years ago, they lost, but they stayed around, defense played great, offense played horrible, you know, and it's just in this weird space when it's like, dang, when is Kentucky gonna figure it out and, you know, get better? But like I say, I got LSU winning that. I just think Kentucky, like I say, they just not there. They just not there. Then playing Mississippi State, another team at the bottom of the SEC. Easy win, easy win. Well, you know, I don't want to say easy because you never know SEC games. That could be you can have a tough game and still win. But like I said, I got them beating Mississippi State. Then at Auburn. Now, one thing about Auburn, it's tricky, man. Because like I say, when you play Auburn on the road and Auburn at home, there are two different teams. When that team is in Georgia and they have that crowd behind them, and like I say, we just know all the magic that happens in that stadium. And like I say, stuff get fishy in that stadium, guys. I'm telling you, we done seen it. So that game, I got LSU pulling out a tough win on the road. A tough win. I think, like I say, you know, Auburn has a new coach as well. Like I say, just like LSU, they got new quarterback. So like I say, I know they hoping that their offense is gonna kick it up. One thing I do know, Auburn defense every year is pretty. good. Like they never have a down year for it. They giving up 40, 50 points. Their defense is always good. Like I say, I think their defense will give them opportunities to win this game. And I think LSU talent and Sam Levitt, them guys, they would just figure out a way to pull that one out. So like I said, I got LSU winning that game. Then all of a sudden, they gotta play Bama. Like I say, Bama gotta go and play at LSU. This game, I got LSU losing primarily because, like I said, I think Alabama will shock a lot of teams this year. Not at that point, but I think this Alabama team is under the radar right now, and it's not an Alabama prediction, but I just think Alabama's under the radar, and their offense I feel will be a lot better. And then, like I say, their secondary, I think Alabama's secondary will be dominant this year, and I think this could be a game that maybe not Alabama offense just dominates, but I think this could be a game that Sam Levitt has one of those 2 interception games or 1 interception, 1 fumble, and Alabama defense carries them to a win. So like I say, I got Alabama winning this game. Then you play Texas. Texas is everybody knows on paper Texas is the team to beat in the SEC on paper. Like I said, we know that on paper doesn't translate to wins in real games, but I do think Texas wins this game. I think Texas defense, guys. I think Texas defense got a lot of dogs, and it will be really tough sledding. It's gonna be hard beating that team. You're gonna have to, like I say, we obviously seen that Georgia has Texas number, and that's how football, that's how sports work sometimes. Sometimes you can have a team number. But I do think Texas will, like I say, will take a step up this year, especially as far as just having more experience. Sark, he's under a lot of pressure, just like Lane. Sark under more pressure because, like I say, he's been in Texas longer. And no Texas fans, they're getting itchy because it's like they're getting antsy because it's like, okay, guy, we're paying money, we're paying millions and millions and millions of dollars. When are you gonna figure it out? First of all, you can't be missing the playoffs. That's one thing you can't do. Like this team should automatically be in the playoffs. But like Sarkisian, he was talking about Texas Tech, which, like I said, I did agree with him about that. Texas Tech schedule is weak, but you got to figure out how to get your team to where you want to go. Texas Tech was in the playoffs last year, so whether their schedule was weak or not, you wasn't in the playoffs. Texas Tech was in the playoffs. Like I say, I do think, I think LSU will lose that one at Texas. So I got them losing 2 in a row right there. Like I say, Bama and Texas. Then all of a sudden, like I say, you go on the road at Tennessee. And then, like I say, when you they go to Tennessee, this right here, this is not a walk in the park game, guys. This is not a walk in the park. I've went back and forth how I feel about this game. I think just because Tennessee is a younger team, new quarterback, and I think Tennessee won't be as motivated at that point of the season because their team is already a lesser, I think their team will have more losses. So at that point, LSU will be playing more for trying to get in the playoffs, especially after losing. If it goes like I say, losing to Alabama and Texas, they're going to want to get back in the win column after 2 straight losses. So I think they win at Tennessee. Like I say, pull out a tough victory. Because like I say, it won't be easy to play in there. And then for the last game of the season, they play Arkansas. So like I say, that game, I think obviously a win. You never know what can happen at the end of the year, but Arkansas is just like, they're in the same boat as Kentucky and Mississippi State. Probably even worse, because Arkansas, like I say, they really can't figure out that. At least Kentucky and Mississippi State sometimes have games that they push teams to the limit that, that they have a tough game. But like I say, Arkansas, horrible. So I got LSU winning that one. So for the season, like I say, I got LSU losing to Ole Miss, Bama and Texas. Like I say, so I got them going like what's say 9-3 on the year. Like I say, and we'll see if that's good enough to get in the playoffs. Who knows? I think it will be a lot of 9-3 teams for the year. LSU, like I say, it's really I think in the SEC when we get to the end of the year, you're gonna hear a lot of more people talking about expanding the college football playoff because it could be a lot of great SEC teams left out of the playoffs if you have a say like a Bama 9-3 or 10-2. Then you got 3 or 4 teams to pick and choose from, and now we're trying to debate resumes once again. And we know NCAA they do what they want. They don't have no criteria that this is how we pick who's the best team. But anyways, guys, like I say, that's it for I say the LSU schedule prediction. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Let me know in the comments, guys, how y'all feel about this LSU team. And any LSU fans, let me know you're excited for the year. Do you expect a championship? Do you expect a playoff win? What's your expectations for the year? But like I said, guys, appreciate you checking in. Catch you next time.